This past Sunday, I reported on a fun but weird story that was causing quite the stir. The story of the mysterious monolith in the high desert plains of Utah, deep in sheep country. The odd thing that happened was that about 20 minutes before that video was scheduled to go live, I received a message from someone while I was on my way to Mass that the monolith had been removed. There wasn't much I could do about it at that point, as, like I said, I was on my way to Mass. The video went live. I received a few emails and comments from people saying that it had been removed, and I thought about doing a follow up, but I decided to wait because I figured there was more to this story than that, and I'm glad that I waited. Because guess what? We have another monolith that appeared somewhere overnight, and it looks exactly like the other one. The story is getting weird, so let's get into this because I also have a hypothesis about where it came from. In fact, I have a couple of hypotheses. Yes, this is a hard hitting story in these times of slow ecclesial news, but a follow up is worth my time because the story may be resolved. Or has it been? And it may touch a little bit on the preternatural, we'll say. So, yes, the original monolith disappeared, likely Friday night and into Saturday morning. The reporting I've seen on this says that local news companies were flying out to the desert in helicopters and saw that the monument or idol had been removed and that the trucks could be seen in the distance leaving the area. I have some more information beyond that here shortly, but I do have to ask a basic question first. If this is true that helicopters saw this, why didn't they pursue? Semi trucks have identification numbers on them and could be easily tracked, but the Utah monolith has since disappeared, having been first seen by Google Earth in late 2016. Remember that date, and disappearing as soon as it was discovered 4 years later, almost as if someone hadn't wanted the thing to be noticed for whatever reason. But we have some details from the New York Times. Quote, it was left to an adventurer, photographer, Ross Bernards, to disclose evidence on Instagram. Mr. Bernards, 34 of Edwards, Colorado, was visiting the monolith on Friday night when he said 4 men arrived, as if out of nowhere, to dismantle the sculpture. Mr. Bernards had driven 6 hours for the chance to ogle the sculpture and to take dramatic photographs of it. Using upscale Lume Cube lights attached to a drone, he produced a series of glowy, moonlit pictures in which the monolith glistens against the red cliffs and the deep blue of the night sky. Suddenly, around 8:40 p.m., he said, the men arrived, their voices echoing in the canyon. Working in twosomes with an unmistakable sense of purpose, they gave the monolith hard shoves, and it started to tilt toward the ground. Then they pushed it into the opposite direction, trying to uproot it. This is why you don't leave trash in the desert, one of them said, suggesting that he viewed the monolith as an eyesore, a pollutant to the landscape, according to Mr. Bernards. The sculpture popped out and landed on the ground with a bang. Then the men broke it apart and ferried it off in a wheelbarrow. End quote. Is the photographer a trusty eyewitness? Maybe, given that the thing was confirmed missing the next day, but the story isn't over, because, well, another one of these things has appeared, half a world away, and in less time than it would take to ship this thing across the world and have it assembled. From the New York Post, quote, another mysterious monolith has surfaced in Romania, days after one vanished without a trace in the Utah desert. The shiny, triangular metallic pillar was found a few yards away from an ancient landmark called the Petrodava Dacian Forest in the city of Piatra named on Thursday, according to the Daily Mail. It measures 13 feet tall and on one side faces Mount Cialu, one of the 7 natural wonders of Romania that is known locally as the Holy Mountain. The origin of the structure has Romanian officials as baffled as their counterparts in Utah. We have started looking into the strange appearance of the monolith, Neamt culture and heritage official Roxana Josanu said, per the British paper. It is on private property, but we still don't know how or who the monolith's owner is yet. It is in a protected area on an archaeological site. Before installing something there, they needed permission from our institution, one that must be approved by the Ministry of Culture. End quote. So at least the local authorities in Romania are on top of the situation. And notice, this thing appeared before the other one came down. It makes you kind of wonder how many of these things are out there now. If you're on YouTube, you can see the image of this thing. And here's the problem. You'll notice that it has a rough, damaged surface, almost if it was put together hastily using damaged steel. There is even what looks like a seam running along the bottom. No, the monolith is in fact not a seamless garment, much to the sadness of Cardinal Supich, who was probably hoping this thing was built by his bridge-building space brothers. I kid, of course, but I am curious about this because monoliths have always been symbols important to some religious practices over the years, and you may have seen a rise of strange things along those lines in recent years, especially in the last few years. The appearance of an idol or monument to something outside of Christendom would be the logical next step in this process, or something similar to what would be, if it's authentic and not just some stunt to market for a product. Imagine the ad campaign for something like this if it was tied to a commercial product like a soft drink, and you get what I mean here. And I have a theory about that. That might be part of it if we leave Romania out of the picture. So, to bring this to a close, the hypothesis that I have seen is that the Utah monolith was part of a Netflix project. Yeah, Netflix, that had been left in the desert. A simple search reveals this: a 2016 Netflix film called Monolith that had been filmed in the Utah desert. Note that date again, 2016, when the original showed up in late 2016. If I'm not mistaken, this is just a piece of junk that got left in the desert from a film shoot, left by lazy filmmakers who didn't bother to clean up after themselves. That doesn't tell us who those men were who removed it, though. And it leaves one problem. Where did the Romanian monolith come from? The other problem with my theory that this is left over from a film shoot in Utah is that the government of Utah has said repeatedly that they have no idea where it came from. And to film a movie, you need a government permit in virtually every state of the Union. Meaning there should be records of this film in whatever government department in Utah handles that sort of thing. Maybe an enterprising person who cares enough will request the records for the film I mentioned and compare them to the monolith location. If anyone watching or listening does that, let me know. My email address is in the description box. I'm genuinely curious. It could honestly be part of something else, though. No, not the machinations of little green men from Zebulon Reticuli or whatever. This could be something else, something of spiritual significance. Not something exactly good either. An example of what I'm referring to comes from Turkey at an ancient archaeological site, where ancient peoples had engaged in some sort of cranial modification, complete with the use of monoliths in their process. I haven't any idea how, but I have a couple of links to that story on the Sources blog at returntotradition.org in today's show notes if you want to read further. It's some weird stuff to be sure, but then again, most of the time ancient archaeology is often the stuff of the weird. And right now we live in a time of a vacuum where the church has decided, for whatever reason, to step back spiritually from the world stage and to engage in other work than the Great Commission, which has caused a vacuum of sorts. And the natural thing for people to do is to attempt to fill that vacuum. And in so doing, many have turned towards what they think is the ancient past and practices of earlier eras. Usually they're not seeing the full picture and instead adopt a version of things filtered through the softness of modernity. That's a topic for another time. My point is this. While it could be a prank or some sort of marketing campaign, it could also be something else, so keep an eye on the headlines for more stories of these things appearing. I'll continue to cover them if more appear. I tend to think this isn't necessarily something positive, though. What do you think? Let me know if you think this is just a silly prank taken to a scale made possible by social media, or if this is something else entirely. Either way, pray for the church. Pray that people don't get all weird with this thing. Thanks for listening. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.